On the 12th day of what was supposed to be her romantic vacation in Alexandria, 41-year-old psychologist Dr. Miriam Seidel from Heidelberg posted her final Facebook status. "The deepest wounds are caused by those we trust most." 12 hours later, room service at the luxurious Four Seasons Hotel found her body in the bathroom of her suite. The cause of death would occupy investigators for weeks, but the circumstances left no doubt. Dr. Seidel had not died from an accident. What the media didn't immediately recognize was the true extent of this tragedy. Miriam had been one of Germany's most respected trauma therapists, a woman who daily helped people recognize and overcome psychological manipulation. Yet she herself had become the victim of one of the most sophisticated love scam operations ever documented. Her tormentor, a 29-year-old man named Karim El-Masri, had used her professional expertise against her and turned her therapeutic instincts into a deadly trap. The last messages on Miriam's phone told a story of systematic manipulation, emotional abuse, and desperate realization. "He knows everything about me," she had written to her assistant. "Every weakness, every desire, every fear. He used my own methods against me." This message was the key to a case that would not only shake the psychological community, but also show that even experts in human manipulation are not safe from the most sophisticated predators. This story doesn't begin with love, but with the most dangerous of all human weaknesses, the belief that intelligence alone protects against emotional exploitation. Dr. Miriam Seidel was brilliant, successful, and deeply lonely. This combination would become her downfall. Dr. Miriam Seidel was considered one of Germany's leading trauma therapists. In her practice in Heidelberg's Old Town, she daily treated people who had become victims of psychological and physical violence. At 41, she had built a reputation as an empathetic but analytically sharp therapist who could decode even the most complex cases of manipulation and abuse. Her office was a reflection of her personality, warm and inviting, but simultaneously professional and thoughtful. Antique psychology books shared shelf space with modern professional journals, and small plants she meticulously tended stood everywhere. On the wall hung her diplomas, a psychology degree from Berlin, a doctorate in trauma processing from Vienna, and certificates from international therapy training programs. Outwardly, Miriam embodied the successful academic, medium height, with shoulder-length brown hair that she usually styled in a practical bun and intelligently gazing green eyes behind elegant glasses. She always dressed professionally, simple blazers, understated colors, little jewelry. Her demeanor radiated competence and trustworthiness, qualities her patients valued and that had brought her professional success. But behind the professional facade hid a woman struggling with her own emotional wounds. Her marriage to lawyer Dr. Stefan Zimmerman had failed 3 years ago, not through spectacular affairs or dramatic conflicts, but through the creeping realization that they had become fundamentally different people. "You're constantly analyzing me," Stefan had accused her during their last major argument. "I feel like a patient, not a husband. You help everyone else solve their problems, but you don't help us." These words had hit Miriam deeper than she wanted to admit. Not because they were wrong, but because they contained a kernel of truth. She had applied her professional methods to their relationship, had tried to analyze and optimize Stefan's behavior instead of simply living and loving with him. After the divorce, Miriam had thrown herself completely into her work. She took on more patients, gave lectures at international conferences, wrote professional articles about manipulation techniques and their recognition. Her expertise was valued, her opinion respected, but her personal relationships suffered under her workaholism. Friendships became superficial. Dates usually ended after a few meetings. The men she met either felt intimidated by her intelligence or bored by her psychological analyses. Miriam began to understand that while her profession helped other people, it sabotaged her own love life. "You think too much," her best friend Dr. Laura Neumann, also a psychologist, said during one of their rare evenings together. "You look for pathologies where there might just be normal human weaknesses, but I see the patterns," Miriam replied. "The way people manipulate, how they hide their true intentions. After what I hear daily, I can't be naive anymore." Laura shook her head. "That's the problem. You approach every relationship like a clinical case. Sometimes you just have to take the risk of being hurt." This conversation took place on a rainy November evening, just a few weeks before Miriam received the message that would change her life. She sat alone in her perfectly organized apartment, reading professional literature and feeling lonelier than ever despite all her knowledge about human connections. Her loneliness wasn't the superficial longing for company, but a deeper need for genuine emotional connection. As a therapist, she daily helped people understand their deepest fears and hopes, but who helped her understand her own emotional needs? In this state, she was particularly receptive to what would happen next. Her analytical abilities, which were normally her protection, would become a weakness, because the man who would target her knew more about therapists' weaknesses than they knew themselves. If you want to know how even experts in manipulation can become victims, then subscribe to this channel. Because what happened to Miriam next shows that knowledge alone doesn't protect against emotional exploitation. Miriam's encounter with Karim El-Masri began in a Facebook group called Spiritual Healing and Psychology, Bridges Between East and West. She had joined the group out of professional interest, fascinated by the cross-cultural approaches to trauma treatment discussed there. As a scientifically minded psychologist, she was normally skeptical of spiritual healing methods, but she recognized their therapeutic value for some patients. It was a Thursday evening in November when she first saw his message. Miriam had just finished a difficult day. A patient with severe abuse trauma had suffered a relapse, and she felt emotionally drained. She was absent-mindedly scrolling through the group's posts when a private message lit up. "Esteemed Dr. Seidel," it read in perfect German, "I read your insightful comments about integrating Western psychology and Eastern spirituality. As someone who experiences both worlds daily, I am deeply moved by your wisdom and open mind. May I introduce myself? My name is Karim El-Masri. I study medicine in Alexandria and work part-time with traumatized people using traditional Egyptian healing methods." Miriam curiously clicked on his profile. The photo showed an attractive young man with dark, intelligent eyes and a warm smile. Karim El-Masri, 29 years old, from Alexandria. His timeline was full of inspiring quotes about healing and compassion, photos of him working in Egyptian hospitals, and scientific articles about the connection between spirituality and medicine. What Miriam didn't know: the profile was a carefully constructed fake. Karim El-Masri did exist, but he wasn't a medical student or a healer. He was a member of an organized scammer group in Alexandria that specialized in wealthy, educated European women. His real name was Ahmed Hassan, and he lived in a slum on the outskirts of Alexandria. But the psychological profiles he had studied were real. Ahmed and his group had spent months observing therapists and psychologists on social media, analyzing their weaknesses, identifying their longings. They knew that intelligent women often responded to intellectual connections, that therapists longed for someone who understood them without needing to be therapized themselves. "Thank you for your kind words," Miriam replied politely. "Your work sounds fascinating. The integration of traditional healing methods into modern trauma therapy is a field that interests me greatly." Karim's response came promptly and was impressively detailed. He described his work with children who had suffered war trauma, told of ancient Egyptian techniques of energetic healing that he combined with modern psychological approaches. His messages were eloquent, compassionate, and showed a deep understanding of trauma complexity. "In Egypt, we say, the soul remembers all wounds, but it also remembers all healings," he wrote. "Your work with traumatized people is a gift to the world. People like you heal not only individual wounds, but the collective consciousness of humanity." These poetic, spiritually tinged words struck Miriam in her deepest core. After years of rational, scientific work, she longed for someone who understood and appreciated the emotional and spiritual dimension of her activity. In the following weeks, an intense intellectual exchange developed between them. Karim sent her rare medical texts from the Arab world, discussed cultural differences in trauma processing with her, shared moving stories of patients he had treated. "You are one of the few Western therapists who understand that healing is more than just symptom control," he wrote after 3 weeks. "In your words, I sense an ancient wisdom, a connection to something greater." Miriam was fascinated by his perspective. Here was someone who not only respected her work but understood it on a spiritual level that she herself was just beginning to explore. His messages always came when she needed them most, after difficult therapy sessions, on lonely evenings, in moments of doubt about her work. "Sometimes I wonder if I'm really helping," she wrote to him one evening after a particularly stressful day. or if I'm just treating symptoms without reaching the deeper causes. Doubt is the sign of a true healer, Kareem replied. Only those who recognize their own limits can transcend them. Your patients are blessed to have someone like you. After a month of exchange, Kareem dared the next step. Dr. Seidel, or may I say Miriam, I must confess that our conversations have changed my life. You have shown me that there are people who are both scientifically brilliant and spiritually awakened. I feel a connection to you that goes beyond the professional. Miriam stared at this message for a long time. Part of her therapeutic training warned her against emotional entanglements with people she didn't know personally. But a larger part of her longed for exactly this kind of connection. Intellectual, spiritual, emotional. I feel this connection too, she finally replied. It's rare to find someone who appeals to both the heart and the mind. With these words, Miriam began her journey into an abyss that she wouldn't see coming with all her psychological expertise. After Miriam's confession that she too felt a special connection, the dynamic of her communication with Kareem changed dramatically. His messages became more personal, more emotional, infused with spiritual concepts that portrayed their connection as something fateful. Miriam, my soul, he wrote a few days later, I believe the universe has brought us together. In Egyptian mythology, there is the concept of Ka, the soul partner who is connected to us through all lives. When I speak with you, I feel this ancient connection. For a woman who had dedicated her life to rational analysis of human behavior, these mystical concepts were intoxicating. Miriam had always believed in science, but in her loneliness, she longed for something greater, for a connection that went beyond the purely intellectual. Kareem began calling daily. His voice was warm, melodic, with a charming Egyptian accent. He spoke about his love for her, about his dreams of a shared future, about the spiritual dimensions of healing. You are the bridge, Miriam, he said in one of their first phone calls. A woman who is both scientifically brilliant and spiritually open. Through you, I understand why my soul wanted to draw me to Europe. These conversations usually took place late in the evening, when Miriam was tired and emotionally receptive. Kareem seemed to intuitively know when she needed him most. When she had a difficult day, he called. When she felt lonely, he wrote her poetic messages about their spiritual connection. You don't just heal people, he said. You heal me too. For years I've worked with trauma patients, and sometimes their pain transfers to me. But when I speak with you, I feel peace. Miriam was touched by the thought that she could provide him comfort. As a therapist, she was used to giving, but rarely experienced someone recognizing and responding to her own emotional needs. After 6 weeks of intense communication, Kareem made a proposal that would change Miriam's life. Miriam, my beloved soul partner, he wrote in a long emotional email, I can't wait any longer. The distance between us is torture. I dream every night of seeing you, touching you, uniting our souls. Will you come to Egypt? I want to show you my country, my work, the places that shaped my soul. Miriam hesitated. Egypt was far away, a different culture, an unknown country. But Kareem's words about soul partnership and spiritual destiny had awakened a deep longing in her. I understand your doubts, Kareem called her after she hadn't responded immediately. But sometimes you have to go beyond reason and follow the heart. Our connection isn't random, Miriam. It's destined. But I don't really know you, Miriam objected. We've never met in person. Souls recognize each other immediately. Kareem replied with a conviction that shook her. You know me better than people I've lived with for years, and I know you, your goodness, your wisdom, your wounded but strong soul. These words hit Miriam to the core. Someone who claimed to see her wounded but strong soul. That was exactly what she had longed for after her failed marriage. When she told Laura about her plans, the reaction was predictable. Miriam, have you gone crazy? Her friend exclaimed. You want to fly to Egypt to meet a man you only know from the internet? You're a psychologist. You know how dangerous that is. This is different, Miriam defended herself. Kareem is a medical professional. He works with trauma patients. We have an intellectual and spiritual connection. Miriam, listen to yourself. You're talking like your patients before they realize they've been manipulated. But Miriam was already too deeply caught in Kareem's spiritual web. You don't understand that, Laura. You've never experienced this kind of connection. It's about more than just romance. It's about spiritual destiny. Laura tried everything to change her friend's mind. She showed her articles about love scams, about women who had been robbed in North Africa. But Miriam didn't listen. Her analytical abilities, which normally protected against manipulation, were paralyzed by her emotional neediness and Kareem's skillful spiritual rhetoric. "He speaks my language," she told Laura. "Finally someone who understands what I do and why I do it." 2 weeks later, Dr. Miriam Seidel sat on a plane to Alexandria. In her handbag, she had 3,000 euros in cash, money that Kareem had requested for spiritual ceremonies and joint healing work. She had no idea that she was financing her own execution. Borg El Arab Airport in Alexandria greeted Miriam with a mixture of excitement and unease. The dry heat, the intense smell of spices and exhaust fumes, the chaos of people and languages, everything was overwhelmingly different from the orderly Germany she knew. But she was determined to embrace this adventure. Kareem was waiting in the arrivals hall with a bouquet of white roses. The first moment of reunion was magical, but also confusing. He looked different from the photos, older, thinner, with a hardness in his eyes that she hadn't expected, but his smile was warm and his embrace felt real. "My beloved soul partner," he whispered in English in her ear. "Finally, you're here. Welcome to my world." The drive to the hotel was a sensory overload. Alexandria wasn't a tourist city like Cairo, but a pulsating, chaotic port metropolis. Poverty and wealth stood directly next to each other. Magnificent colonial buildings decayed next to modern high-rises. "The city has many faces," Kareem explained when he noticed Miriam's confusion. "Like the human soul, you must see all levels to understand the truth." The hotel where he had accommodated her was luxurious, the Four Seasons Alexandria. Miriam was surprised by the elegance and the costs. "Kareem, this is very expensive," she said worriedly. "I can't expect this from you." "Money is just energy," he replied with a mystical smile. "When it's used for the right intention, it flows back to us. You deserve only the best." What Miriam didn't know, the hotel was being paid for with her own credit card. Kareem had told a skillful story about advance payments for joint projects and had obtained her card data during their online conversations. The first 2 days were like something from a spiritual novel. Kareem led her through Alexandria, showed her historical sites, told her about the mystical history of the city. They visited the famous library, walked along the sea, ate in small restaurants with authentic Egyptian cuisine. "Here I meditated every morning before I knew you," he said as they stood on the corniche at sunset. "I prayed to the universe to send me my soul partner, and then you appeared in my life." Miriam was touched by his spirituality and apparent vulnerability. He told her about his difficult childhood, the early death of his mother, his struggle to work his way out of poverty to help others. "Trauma is universal," he said as they walked hand in hand on the beach. "But so is healing. You and I, we are destined to bring this healing into the world together." But already on the third day, cracks began to show in the perfect facade. Kareem led her to his supposed healing center, a shabby building in a run-down neighborhood. The medical staff were obviously not doctors, and the patients seemed like actors. "It's modest," Kareem admitted when he saw her confusion. "But real healing doesn't need luxurious facilities, it just needs pure intentions." Miriam tried to suppress her doubts. As a therapist, she knew the importance of environment and professional standards, but she didn't want to hurt Kareem or appear as an arrogant Westerner. On the fourth day, everything changed dramatically. Kareem began making demands. "Miriam, my love," he said at breakfast with a serious expression, "I must tell you something important. There's a problem with the healing center. We urgently need money for medical equipment and medications for the children." "How much money?" Miriam asked carefully. 5,000 euros. "I know it's a lot, but these children will die without help." Miriam was shocked. "Kareem, I don't have that much money with me." His facial expression changed subtly. The warmth disappeared, replaced by something colder. "You're a successful doctor from Germany. 5,000 euros is nothing for you." "That's not true," Miriam protested. "I'm a psychologist, not a doctor, and 5,000 euros is a lot of money for me too." "I see," Kareem said with a mocking undertone. "So you only help when it costs you nothing. Very spiritual." This sudden aggression frightened Miriam. This wasn't the gentle, mystical man she had fallen in love with, but she rationalized his behavior as stress because of the sick children. "I can give you 2,000 euros, she offered. "I really don't have more." Kareem's smile immediately returned. "You're an angel, Miriam. The children will bless you." But 2,000 euros was only the beginning. In the following days, the emergencies multiplied. Problems with authorities that required money, medical equipment that had to be paid for immediately. Again and again, Karim found new ways to tap into Miriam's compassion and her wallet. After a week, Miriam had lost all her cash, and then Karim showed his true face. When Miriam's money was exhausted, Karim's spiritual facade disappeared like morning mist in the Egyptian sun. The mystical speeches about soul partnership and universal love were replaced by cold demands and poorly concealed threats. "You have no more money?" he asked on the 8th day of her stay with a voice Miriam didn't recognize. "What should I do with you then?" "Karim, I don't understand," Miriam stammered confusedly. "I thought it was about us, about our connection." He laughed bitterly. "Connection? You naive German woman. Do you really think I would be interested in an old, desperate psychologist if she brings me nothing?" The cruelty of his words hit Miriam like physical blows. In that moment, she grasped the full extent of her error. All her professional knowledge about manipulation and abuse that she had applied to her patients for years had been useless when she herself became the victim. Karim cynically explained his true business to her. "We have a system," he said coldly. "We look for lonely European women, especially the educated ones. They're the easiest to manipulate because they think they're too intelligent to be deceived." He showed her photos on his phone, other German, French, and Swedish women, all between 40 and 60 years old, all with the same hopeful expression that Miriam recognized from her own vacation photos. "This teacher from Munich gave us 10,000 euros, the nurse from Stockholm 15,000. You've been a disappointment so far." Miriam desperately tried to rationalize the situation. "Karim, this can't be. Our conversations, our connection, were all scripted," he interrupted brutally. "Do you think I accidentally found exactly the right spiritual words? We studied profiles, learned what lonely therapists want to hear." He pulled out a notebook and showed her pages full of notes about her. Her weaknesses, her dreams, her fears, everything was meticulously documented and categorized. "Here, target is divorced, childless, longs for spiritual connection, weak points, helper complex, loneliness, need for intellectual recognition. You were a textbook case." The realization that her most intimate feelings and longings were just data in a scammer's manual broke something in Miriam. The psychologist who had helped others recognize manipulation for years had herself become the victim of the most sophisticated psychological manipulation. "Give me my passport back," she demanded with a trembling voice. "You'll get it when you pay," Karim replied icily. "You still owe me 8,000 euros for hotel costs and my time." "What hotel costs? I paid for that myself," Karim grinned maliciously. "With your own credit card, yes, but at my behest. Technically, it was a loan from me to you." It was a perfect bureaucratic nightmare. Without a passport, she couldn't return to Germany. Without money, she couldn't get the passport back. And without freedom, she couldn't get money. Miriam was brought to a shabby apartment on the outskirts of Alexandria, where she had to live with other members of Karim's gang. The luxurious hotel world was over, replaced by the harsh reality of a criminal network. "You stay here until your family pays," Karim explained. "And no foolishness. Nobody knows you here. If you disappear, nobody asks about you." The other residents of the apartment treated Miriam with undisguised mockery. They called her the stupid German and made fun of her naivety. "You really thought he loved you?" laughed a young woman named Yasmin. "An old, desperate foreigner. Who would want something like that?" Miriam had to work in the household, cook, clean, run errands. When she was too slow or refused, she was threatened or beaten. The hygienic conditions were catastrophic, the food bad and scarce. After 2 weeks in captivity, Miriam managed to secretly send an email to her assistant in Heidelberg. She had found an old phone and bribed a neighbor to give her a few minutes of internet. "Please help me," she wrote desperately. "I'm trapped in Alexandria. Karim El-Masri is a scammer. Contact the German embassy in Cairo. I'm in mortal danger." But Karim had tracked the phone. When Miriam woke up the next morning, he was angrier than ever before. "You stupid bitch," he roared and hit her in the face. "You think you can deceive me?" He took away the phone and locked her in a small room. "If your daughter sends money, it belongs to me. You have debts to me." In Heidelberg, Miriam's desperate email triggered a chain of events that should save her life, almost. Dr. Sabine Muller, Miriam's assistant and longtime colleague, knew her boss well enough to know this was no joke. "This isn't Miriam's way of writing," she told Dr. Laura Neumann after contacting her. "She's normally so precise, so controlled. This email sounds panicked. Laura acted immediately. She contacted the German embassy in Cairo, the Foreign Office in Berlin, and even Interpol. But the bureaucratic mills ground slowly, and time was the critical factor. Romance scams are hard to prosecute, an embassy official explained to her. Technically, Dr. Seidel traveled to Egypt voluntarily. Without an official cry for help or evidence of a crime, we can't do much. But Laura knew the system. She used her contacts in the psychological community, mobilized colleagues throughout Europe who had documented similar cases. It quickly became clear that Miriam wasn't the first victim. Karim El-Masri is an alias, reported an Italian colleague. We have 3 similar cases from Rome, always the same pattern: spiritual seduction, invitation to Egypt, then extortion. Meanwhile, Miriam's situation deteriorated daily. Karim forced her to call her family and ask for money. Laura received a desperate call from Alexandria. "Laura, please help me," Miriam whispered into the phone. "They're holding me captive. I was so stupid." "Where are you exactly?" Laura asked, trying to stay calm. "I don't know. Somewhere on the outskirts of Alexandria, in an apartment complex." In the background, Laura heard voices in Arabic. Then the connection was cut. Karim took the phone away from her. "Your friend will pay," he said confidently, "or you'll disappear here like the others." "What others?" Miriam asked with growing fear. Karim smiled coldly. "Do you think all our guests leave us alive?" This threat made clear to Miriam that her life was in acute danger. She desperately began to develop an escape plan. As a therapist, she had spent years working out survival strategies with trauma victims. Now she had to apply these techniques to herself. The breakthrough came through an unexpected source. Yasmin, the young woman who had made fun of Miriam, came to her one night. "I want to get out of here," she whispered in English. "Karim will kill us all when we know too much. Help me escape, and I'll take you to Germany with me," Miriam promised. Yasmin hesitated, then nodded. "Tomorrow morning the men go away. For 2 hours. We have a chance." On the 12th day of her stay in Alexandria's hell, Miriam saw her chance. Yasmin had explained the escape plan to her, a small window on the ground floor that led to an alley. From there, they could walk to the main train station and try to get to the German embassy in Cairo. But the plan went wrong before it really began. When Miriam climbed out the window, Karim was already waiting in the alley. "Did you really think Yasmin would help you?" He laughed. "She works for me. That was a test." Miriam recognized the perfect psychological trap. Even in her desperation, she had been manipulated. Yasmin stood behind Karim and avoided Miriam's gaze. "You've wasted your last chance," Karim said, with a coldness that made Miriam's blood freeze. She was dragged back into the apartment and locked in a basement room. Through the thin walls, she heard conversations in Arabic, but she understood enough to know that her fate was being decided. In her desperation, Miriam managed to send one last message with a hidden phone. It wasn't addressed to Laura or the embassy, but was a public Facebook post. "The deepest wounds are caused by those we trust most. Alexandria, final entries, truth." She added a long message telling her story, identifying Karim and warning other women. It was her legacy, her last attempt to create something good from her tragedy. Karim found the phone a few hours later. His rage was indescribable. "You stupid slut," he screamed. "You've ruined us all." His accomplices pressed to solve the problem immediately. Miriam understood without translation what that meant. In her final hours, Miriam thought of her patients, of all the people she had helped overcome trauma. She thought of Laura, her loyal friend who had tried to warn her. She thought of her failed marriage and wondered if she had judged Stefan too harshly. Above all, she thought about the irony of her fate. She, the expert in manipulation and abuse, had herself become a victim. But perhaps that was her final lesson, that knowledge alone doesn't protect against human weakness. Miriam's body was found the next morning in the bathroom of her hotel suite. Karim had brought her there to make it look like suicide, but the Egyptian investigators quickly found traces of violence. The news of Dr. Miriam Seidel's death reached Germany like a shockwave through the psychological community. One of the country's most respected trauma therapists, dead in an Egyptian hotel under mysterious circumstances, it was a story that immediately gained international attention. Laura Neumann flew immediately to Alexandria to help with the investigations. She brought all emails, phone numbers, and information she had collected about Karim. "This wasn't a random murder," she told Commissioner Ahmed Farouk, the lead investigator. This was professional fraud that ended in murder. The Egyptian police took the case seriously, especially after Miriam's Facebook post had gone viral and attracted international media attention. Dozens of other women came forward and reported similar experiences with Karim or his accomplices. It's a network, Commissioner Farouk realized. They operate in multiple cities, use different identities, but the methods are always the same. The search of Karim's hideouts brought forth shocking evidence. Notebooks full of profiles of European women, detailed plans for emotional manipulation, and even audio recordings of phone calls with victims that were used for training new scammers. They had analyzed Miriam's entire personality, reported a forensic psychologist. Her weaknesses, her dreams, her fears, it's like surgical intervention in the human psyche. Most shocking was a document titled The Therapist Protocol. It described in detail how to manipulate psychologists and therapists. Therapists are ideal targets because they naturally want to help and consider themselves emotionally intelligent, use spiritual language, talk about healing and universal connections. They will think they understand you, but you understand them. The document also contained instructions for various phases of manipulation: love bombing with spiritual concepts, gradual isolation from friends and family, financial exploitation, and finally physical control. Karim was arrested 3 days after Miriam's death in a hideout outside Alexandria. At his arrest, he showed no remorse. She was greedy, he told investigators coldly. She wanted spiritual enlightenment without a price. When she realized everything has a price, she became difficult. 8 other members of his network were arrested in the following weeks. The investigations revealed that they had defrauded at least 20 European women in the last 3 years. 4 other women had disappeared, probably murdered, but their bodies were never found. Miriam wasn't the first, Commissioner Farouk reported to German authorities, but her story helped us uncover the entire network. The trial against Karim and his accomplices took place 6 months later. Laura traveled to Alexandria to testify for Miriam. She was a brilliant woman, she said in court. She dedicated her life to helping others. She deserved love and respect, not exploitation and murder. Karim showed no remorse during the entire trial. He claimed Miriam had come to Egypt voluntarily and had voluntarily decided to give money. She sought spiritual enlightenment, he said cynically. I gave her what she was looking for. The court saw it differently. Karim was sentenced to life imprisonment for fraud, extortion, kidnapping, and murder. His accomplices received sentences between 15 and 25 years. 1 year after Miriam's death, Laura Neumann organized a memorial conference in Heidelberg. Dr. Miriam Seidel, learning from tragedy, brought together therapists, investigators, and victim protection experts from across Europe. Miriam would want her death to help others, Laura said in her opening speech. She was a healer to the end. Now we must continue her legacy. The conference led to the founding of the Seidel Institute for Manipulation Protection, which specialized in educating even professionals about the dangers of emotional manipulation. The paradox of Miriam's case is that she possessed all theoretical knowledge about manipulation, explained Dr. Prof. Andreas Weber, a leading expert in forensic psychology. But emotional manipulation doesn't work through the mind, but through the heart. Miriam's story became a turning point in education about love scams. Her Facebook posts and emails became teaching material in universities and police academies. Laura found an unfinished book about manipulation protection in Miriam's estate. The last chapter, which she had written shortly before her trip to Egypt, was titled, When Experts Become Victims. Knowledge doesn't protect against loneliness, Miriam had written, and loneliness makes even the smartest among us vulnerable. The greatest danger for therapists is the belief that our professional knowledge protects us from human weaknesses. The book was published posthumously and became a standard work on manipulation protection. The proceeds went to a foundation that helps victims of romance scams. 3 years after the trial, Laura received a letter from the Egyptian prison. Karim had written, supposedly to apologize. Dr. Seidel was a good woman, the letter said. She deserved a better end. Laura recognized the manipulation even in his apologies. She didn't respond. On Miriam's 4th death anniversary, the Seidel Institute organized an international conference on protection from emotional manipulation. Hundreds of therapists, investigators, and survivors participated. Miriam sought spiritual connection and found death, Laura said in her memorial speech. But her death wasn't in vain if it prevents others from the same fate. Miriam's story became a warning shared in psychological journals, therapy training programs, and online forums. Her case showed that even experts in human manipulation aren't safe from the most sophisticated scammers. The most important lesson from Miriam's tragedy was simple but life-saving. Real spiritual connection never pressures you into quick decisions. Real love doesn't isolate you from family and friends. Real healing doesn't cost money. Dr. Miriam Seidel had dedicated her life to healing others. Her own wound, loneliness, and longing for connection became her downfall. But through her death, she became a healer for countless others who understand her story as a warning and are thereby saved. Her legacy is a vital realization. Even experts are only human, and humans are vulnerable, especially when they are lonely and long for love.